Okay, hi guys. So this is going to be just a short supplementary video to show you how to join together this Ziggurat into one object, export it into one of the many just regular file types you can use to take objects out of Blender, but we're going to use a file type also that is designed for 3D printing. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is make all of this one object. Now you'll remember that our staircase is still using all the modifiers, so actually it's just this little chunk of staircase being repeated and rotated to make all of the flights of stairs. So to apply these, let's go into the modifiers panel, and you should have 4 modifiers, the mirror and then the 3 arrays. And we want to apply them in the order in which we put them onto the object. That is the mirror first, then array, array 1 and array 2. If we did it the other way, if we applied array 2 first, things like this would happen. You know, it sort of is reversing the logic that we set down, you know, giving us some fascinating artistic results, but not the results we want in order to export this form. So I'll just Command Z out of that, and I'll show you how it looks if we apply them in their correct order. So I'll apply the mirror modifier and the 3 arrays. So when I do that, you'll see that nothing changes in the viewport, and we have staircases now that are all one object. Okay, the second thing we need to do is to connect the staircases to the Ziggurat base. I might actually just rename this object Ziggurat base. And okay, I've got 3 different methods for joining this together. And in order to show you all 3, I'm going to duplicate all of this. So I'll just left click the stairs, shift left click the base, and hit Shift D and Y to just move it there. And I'll do that again, Shift D and Y. So now we have 3 Ziggurats. Okay, so the first way to join these together, super simple. Select the stairs, Shift select the base, and hit Control J. So now we have all one object here, all connected. Now it's got a few problems for 3D printing. One of them is that none of the faces of our objects are really connected to each other. We've just joined the meshes. So if we put this straight into a 3D printer, it might have a little bit of a problem sort of working out, you know, what happens in this gap, and the fact that these meshes are really just sitting on top of each other. They're not actually joined together. And, you know, we'll see the same thing if we look at the base here. It's not joined together. So the other way to join these together is to use what we call a Boolean operation, which I'll show you on this model. If I add a modifier to the Ziggurat base called a Boolean. Boolean just refers to a particular mathematical operation that is being used to join these meshes. And so I've got a Boolean modifier on the base, and it's asking me what object is this modifier going to refer to. So the object is going to be the stairs. So I'm going to take this eyedropper here tool and click on the stairs. And now you can't actually see what's going on, but the operation is set to difference, and if I move these stairs, let's say on the Z axis, grab and Z, move them down, and I hide the original staircase, you're going to see that it's using the staircase as kind of a knife, and it's cutting away every place that the staircase intersects with the Ziggurat. So I'll just Shift Z so that my staircase is back where I want it. So instead of difference, we actually want union. We want this modifier to calculate where these 2 objects intersect and to make a new mesh based on the intersection of these objects. So instead of just joining them, we're asking it to calculate every place that these objects intersect and to join them together. So if I hide, I think it was this staircase, and hit apply, now we've got one mesh as well, but some of the meshes should now be more connected. But it's probably still a bit of a problem, which is that there wasn't a great deal of overlapping of these meshes in the first place, because when we modeled it, you know, we had things sitting next to each other in a very precise way, but not really overlapping in a way that a 3D printer would know how to connect them together. So one way around this, I'll show you on the third example, is I'm just going to make the base a tiny bit bigger so these faces have a chance to intersect rather than overlap. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale up the base. I'm going to press N to bring up my scale. I'll scale up the base by 2.1 on the X and Y. And I could even scale up the Z perhaps to 0.3. Whoa, that's probably a little bit much. Maybe 0.26. And it's just given us a tiny little bit of overlapping there. And maybe if I look, hold on, maybe if I look from this axis, I still want to make sure the stairs are touching the ground, so I'm going to grab that on the Z-axis and just pull it down. Now, mesh-wise, if we did this a few years ago, this might have been a bit of a problem, but after we export these 3D files for printing, there are a lot of external online tools that can just look for a lot of the problems that these meshes might have and clean them up automatically. So because this is still at a very introductory stage, I'll show you how to do that at a later date. But just on how to export these now, okay, so I'm going to add that modifier again, add modifier Boolean, and I'll select the stairs and set the Boolean to union, and I'll hide those staircases, hit apply, and now things should be a bit more joined together. Yeah, that's better. Okay. Now, there's probably still a bunch of problems with any of these meshes, and I'll show you how to check. Blender has a few great checking tools for 3D printing built in. If I click on this mesh and go to edit mode by pressing tab and select in the overlay section here, mesh analysis, it should highlight any parts of the mesh that are not that will create a problem for a 3D printer. And here, the parts of the mesh that will create a problem are these two faces here. And if I go into mesh, normals, and flip, that should fix that up. But you know, these days I tend to use online services such as NetFab before I put anything through a 3D printer. But we'll look at that later. For now, I'm just going to show you how to export any of these so that you have a 3D printable file that then you can clean up and etc. etc. So to export the file, there's a few things we want to do. We want to have the location values at 0 and the scale values all at 1. That's because if the scale values here, I set them all to 1 now, weird things are probably going to happen. Weird things indeed. And that's because, you know, as we were 3D modeling, we took a cube and we changed its scale, but we never applied that scale. So if I imported this now into a 3D file, another 3D program, it will probably come out like this because it doesn't know that actually we wanted it to look like this because we didn't apply these scale values. So to do that, I hit Control A and apply scale, and now you can see that all the scale values have gone to 1. The last thing I want to do is to set the location back to 0 so that our object is in the middle of the 3D space. And then once to export this object, I simply have this object selected and I click File, Export, and I want you to export it to an STL file. If you don't see STL on this list, that's no problem. I'm just going to Edit, Preferences, and just type STL in the search bar and make sure that that Import Export STL format is ticked. And then once again, File, Export, STL. And very important here, make sure that Selection Only is ticked. Otherwise, it's going to export everything in the scene into that STL. And if you've got a lot of objects, that could very quickly become a huge file. Okay, so make sure Selection Only is ticked and just select a folder, here are all the other tests I've been making. I'm going to call this one week 1 Ziggurat number 6 and click export STL, and then that should be exported. And all I'd like you to do is, make some version of the Ziggurat. You can get creative with it, make whatever you like, export it as an STL and upload it to the assignment section that I've set up on Moodle. Okay, thanks guys. Bye bye.